All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our NGH-WA chapter meeting for September 2024. I'm Jody Solberg, and I am the chapter president. I'm also going to be speaking today with our wonderful membership chair, Barb Decker, and we are going to be talking all about prenatal bonding VA, what that is, and the history. And so, Barb, I'm going to let you get started. Tell them about you and the history of how you got started with this and how you brought me into it.
I know, I'm very excited about that. As you can tell, I've been around a long time. And my journey has been from my own birth, the impact of my own first birth, and the second birth, having had childbirth classes, and I became a childbirth educator. And as a childbirth educator, I also was exposed to doula work. So I started doing doula work. And in doing the doula work, I met this wonderful psychotherapist, Phyllis Klaus, who gave some lectures on hypnosis at one of the doula conferences. And I was so absolutely sold that hypnosis had so much power, that a woman could birth a baby so much calmly, much easier, with lowering her fear levels. So I was totally impressed with that, and I became a hypnobirthing practitioner. So along the way, being a doula, I met this wonderful gentleman. His name was Fred Worth, and he wrote this book called Prenatal Parenting. And Fred was a neonatologist who got very tired of having these little tiny preterm babies born, and he was to save their lives. And he kept thinking there's got to be a reason why women are having preterm babies. And so when the couples that he had worked with on their babies got pregnant again, he asked them to come to a class that he was forming, where he was teaching the parents and educating them. How did they feel when they were pregnant? I mean, how did they feel when they first found out they were pregnant? And then knowing the importance of their relationship in building a healthy baby. And he developed this wonderful 15 minutes a day fetal love breaks, with a mother who just spent 15 minutes 3 times a day letting the baby know how much they love. So that opened my mind to something that I never thought about in all the years that I was a childbirth educator. And it was never addressed in childbirth education. We teach you how to get the baby out of the womb. Nothing about the psychology of what the baby is experiencing in the womb. So that opened the door. The next one that came along was The Secret Life of the Unborn Child by Thomas Ferdy. Now, the other guy's a neonatologist. He is a shrink. He's a psychiatrist that wrote this book, and he said, mother's emotions are affecting the baby growing in the womb. And we need to pay attention to that. We need to teach our mothers and fathers that they need to welcome the baby. They need to have their emotions realize the baby's feeling everything as they're growing in the womb. And that blew my mind. Here is a psychiatrist saying that babies are affected during the pregnancy period because of the mother's emotional state at the time. Well, I devoured that book, and I found the organization called APA, which is the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology. And I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Burney. I had the pleasure of meeting David Chamberlain, his partner who started the organization. And I was welcomed with open arms as being a childbirth educator and learning there's so much more. So I became a very active member in APA. And the whole concept of the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology is to try to educate the public that these babies, those of us that are working in hypnotherapy, anxiety, fears, all of this is actually coming from that baby's womb experience. It's starting even before conception. The feelings that the parents have with this child that's coming. And this is hard for practitioners to grasp because it's intangible. But there's so much research now that says babies are affected by stress. They're getting anxiety, and we wonder why some babies are coming out of the womb and hard to settle down, and other babies are coming out of the womb going, "Oh, there you are, Mom. There you are, Dad. Let's get moving." Emotionally regulated, mentally healthy. It's because they were given a healthy pregnancy psychological situation during that pregnancy. So through APA, this guy came from Germany who's a psychoanalyst, and he gave a lecture at APA where he has been studying with a Hungarian psychiatrist that developed this program, which is prenatal bonding analysis. And it was Raffi and Heides that drew Gerhardt into realizing that these men were studying, they were studying pathology. They were studying social problems of the children, and realizing that a lot of these problems were stemming from a relationship with their mothers and not making a healthy break where they were still attached to their schizophrenia was one of the major things that they were studying. And they found if they could spend time with the families, find out how they were brought up, what their pregnancy was like, what their parents' living situation was like, what their pregnancies were like, because we use the quote, the apple doesn't fall from the tree. So each generation is passing on, oftentimes trauma from the previous generation. And when you uncover these traumas, the generational traumas, these families are able to release the traumas that have passed through their families for generations and start anew, recognizing how important it was to give that baby in the womb a beautiful chance to come into the world emotionally regulated, architecturally brain related, and these babies, great self-esteem, they're settled, they sleep better, and we have no cases of autism in over 8,000 cases, less than 2% postpartum depression, less than 2% in over 10,000 cases. And on the main market, it's normally about 20%. So Gerhardt decided to do trainings for individuals that were interested in helping to grow healthy babies in the womb. And I wasn't going to take the training. I felt I was too old. It was psychology, and I actually hated psychology in school. And but I had lots of questions about it. So when he did the interview cycle for people to be admitted into his training, I had so many questions coming from a medical background. Why did they do this? Why did they do that? Why do the next thing? And frankly, I thought I was a pain in the butt in the class because nobody else was questioning what was going on. And so it takes a long time. It's a 2-year training. And I was in my late 60s. So I really thought to myself, now, I'd love to do it, but I'm too damn old. Well, he calls me from Germany and he said, "Oh, you are going to take this training. You had so many questions. You understand what we're up against, and I really need you for this training. You'll help to bring about an input from so many different, from psychology, from medicine, and so forth, that it will round out the group." Well, when a psychoanalyst says you got enough brains, you can do the work. I took the course and I've never looked back. The families that I have worked with have gone from frightened parents with medical problems to be able to have births with babies that they said were never viable. Miracles I've seen happen by doing this prenatal bond. And it's helping those parents trust that baby in the womb and feeling love. And the bottom line, love can overpower anything. So I am now a trainer for the United States. There's a psychologist and myself. So we are the first US trainers in the United States. And there are only about 16 people across the US that are working in this field. And Jody heard me talk about this. So Jody's been on her own, journey. And she first tapped into it by wanting to do hypnobirthing. And then next thing I knew, she said, "I want to do the prenatal bonding too." And I went, "Rah, thank goodness." So Jody, your turn. We just got back from Germany doing the first week of the training, and in this beautiful little German medieval village where the psychiatrist lives. And so you take it from there.
It was absolutely right. Yes, we just got back a few days ago. And yeah, it was interesting because for me, it made so much sense because of my background. So I mentioned to people when I did my introduction earlier. So my background is social and clinical psychology. And so for me, since the very beginning of my career, so for 25 years, I have been working in families. So with people who are pregnant, with kids of all ages. And most of my work has been around trauma, so abuse, crisis, custody issues, and anxieties, or fears, and all of these different things. And I've done a lot of work with, even small children, so 3 and 4 years old, and then people who are 30, 40, 50, 70 plus years old, who are all dealing with the effects of anxieties and stressors, traumas from early childhood birth. And so, I've worked with 3-year-olds who already had a sense of feeling a low self-worth or self-esteem, that felt conditions on the love that they would get from their parents, that they had to achieve in order for their parents to be proud of them or to love them. So many different things, and a lot of trauma in even small children, all the way up to, like I said, people who were, adults who were still dealing with those effects. And what I thought when Barbara and I first started talking, we actually got connected over sleep talk, which is for children who are already here. So more like 18 months to 18 years, so all different ages. And it's early intervention, and it's helping to reestablish that unconditional love. Because, in the work that I'd always done, I didn't want to just focus on the individual. I wanted to focus on the relationships, the primary relationships, and how they interacted. And like Barbara was talking about, the generational cycles and patterns and the things that were passed down. And I worked with a ton of women who were wanting to break those cycles. They didn't want to pass on their traumas and their generational patterns onto their children. They knew what they didn't want to do, but they didn't know what to do, right? They didn't know how to change that. And so often I would work with women who would say, okay, so you helped me with this, you know, help me help my kids. And so that's how we originally got connected is I heard her talk about this sleep talk program, Goulding method of sleep talk. And I decided to get certified in that. And then last World Hypnotism Day, so last January, she had information on her table. And she was talking about hypnobirthing. And I knew she'd done that. And I just kept coming across cases in my practice. I just kept coming across women who, you know, because I work with all different ages of women, but I work with a lot kind of in the sandwich generation, just where I am. I'm in that really interesting age group where half of my friends have little babies and half of them are parents. So it's really interesting. So we're dealing with, you know, kids, grandkids, aging parents, all the things. And I kept coming across women who, you know, were either younger or in that same kind of age range as me, who were wanting to do something different, like I mentioned, but maybe they were having a hard time connecting. They were having either a hard time getting pregnant or they were having a hard time connecting with they were, or again, they were just really afraid of passing on those different patterns. Maybe they had existing kids and they always said, I don't want to do what my parents did. And then their dad's voice comes out of their mouth to their 8-year-old and they have another one on the way and they're, what do I do with it? And so I was already trying to do some of that work as a hypnotherapist. I was already helping them to try to connect, to try to ease those fears and anxieties and past birth traumas, either their own or past births that they had had, you know, helping them to connect. But I didn't have that specific structure, you know, that specific um, approach and philosophy and training for that. It just happened to come across my, you know, where I would work with clients and this is what they wanted. You know, I have a client right now who I actually, once we started talking and I decided to get certified for hypnobirthing, and I had so much more knowledge that I could share. It wasn't just the hypnosis part, right? It wasn't just breathing techniques, and visualization, affirmations, and different suggestions and helping ease those things. It was also the childbirth education part. And hypnobirthing is very comprehensive when it comes to that. And so I am a huge believer in helping parents feel empowered and be their own advocates and teaching them. And I feel like sleep talk, as well as hypnobirthing, as well as prenatal bonding VA, all shows that there's things that you can do, that you're not powerless, that it's never too late or early. Yes, is it ideal to start before your child's born? Of course, you're already here. So many things that you can do. And, you know, a lot of people have more children, have one. And so it was really an interesting evolution because I was already diving into that early intervention. And then I saw hypnobirthing and prenatal bonding VA as the prevention part. And I loved that. I loved that because so many people who I was working with had dealt with or were dealing with postpartum challenges. And in our country specifically, speak to that because in the US, like this is what I hear in the media, you all of these things. I honestly thought before I dived into hypnobirthing and prenatal VA, I really thought that hypnosis was probably the most misrepresented thing in the media until I learned more about children. And I figured out that actually they're pretty neck and neck. Because what do you hear? You hear about um, postpartum depression. That's all you hear about. Nobody ever says anything other than postpartum depression. And I was working with clients who had, yes, that, but also had things like postpartum anxiety, postpartum PTSD, postpartum OCD. I even had a client, of course, I worked with after the fact, and I always work with my client psychiatrist for this, but postpartum psychosis. And there's so many different mental health challenges that can happen, especially when you're not connecting, you're not bonded. There's trauma that happens in the process of pregnancy and childbirth, and they're feeling like they're not in control and things are just being done to them. And so I saw a huge uptick And all of that are in the pandemic time frame. So I had a lot of people who were dealing with these things, and it can last 6 months, but they can also last a lot. And so I was so excited to dive in and be able to help people prevent that. I never, I honestly never heard of that you could, like, they were studying, like Barb said, things like schizophrenia, like, where did that come from? Like, never in my entire education had anybody ever said there's something you can do to prevent this thing. And it was amazing learning the research of, like, okay, if the mother has these kinds of feelings, kinds of thoughts in these weeks of pregnancy, it makes you more predisposed to maybe ADHD or schizophrenia or anxiety. And it was fascinating to me. So fast forward, Barb was doing, I said, tell me when you have your next hypnobirthing training. I'm there. And to me, they fit hand in hand. That was just how it made sense to me, because I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna have to find people, first of all, for prenatal bonding VA, if that's something I want to do. And so getting connected into the community of different providers, doulas and wives, and different care providers, as well as people who are going through these things. Because again, I would have clients who would get pregnant and these things would happen, but to be able to help so many more people and to get the word out about this became a passion. So I decided to just do the hypnobirthing and then follow it right up with the prenatal bonding training, because these do not come around very often, because it is a long process. It's an 18-month program, just at the beginning of it at the moment. And the time, it was just perfect. The time was right for it. And so I went to Germany with Barbara and met Dr. Gerhard Schropp and his wife, Anne, who is absolutely incredible. They're both incredible trainers. And then Barbara and our trainers in the US and Europe. And we had of us from Europe and the US who went over to Germany to learn and do the hands-on. Now we do have training through, so we have lots of time to work on some cases. But what I wanted to share is some statistics, because that's what really blew me away, is the process and the statistics and how incredible it is. And so, prenatal bonding VA, like bonding analysis. And so that's where the VA comes in. And it's a facilitation. It's a facilitation where there's a few different steps to it. There's a detailed assessment, and that could take a few sessions and somebody just go through that assessment. And what that assessment is the deep history of someone's of the parents, both parents, right, who are contributing to this pregnancy. They have a background. We all have a history. We have early childhood. We all do have memories. That's the other thing that's very misrepresented. We, have been told, like, we're blank slates and nobody has memories until you're like 3, which isn't true. You just didn't have, yeah, she's like, we just didn't have language to describe those experiences. Those things are still stored in our subconscious. They're still stored in our bodies. And we're little subconscious sponges from conception on, absolutely. And so we're absorbing all of these things. We're developing, right, our beliefs about ourselves and our relationships and the world around us. And we're absorbing all of those emotions and all of the chemical hormones and all of those things. Well, we have that we carry with us. And that's part of what we pass on, right? That modeling, things that we pass on, those cycles and those patterns. And so that really detailed assessment about both parents and even their pregnancy first, they were first born, and then also their past potential, pregnancies, maybe losses, things like, grief, things of that nature, because that affects us, right? That affects us if we have past fertility struggles or pregnancies, losses, miscarriages, etc. But we carry those things with us. And so it's really important to go through that history. And what a lot of people are going to find so helpful with that assessment is awareness, right? I always say awareness is the first step. And through that awareness, you also have acknowledgement, you also have others. You can process, right? You can process what you become aware. And let that go. And then you know what has been affecting you all of this time. And so it's a really detailed process with this questionnaire that then they're going to have that awareness, and we're going to see if we're a good fit, if prenatal bonding BA is a great fit for them, and also if they're a good fit for it as well. It can be started pretty early in pregnancy, around week 18. You can go up to 28. I mean, it's a process where you're going to have the assessments, and then you have at least 10 what's called baby sessions where you're bonding, right, with the baby. And so that includes basically a relaxation induction. It is helping them to relax and connect. And one of my favorite things to do, because I do have in my toolbox, somatics is a big piece of what I do as well. So I'm all about connecting inward, connecting with the body, connecting, of course, with your subconscious, and really tuning inward, tuning in and learning your body signs and signals. And so helping to induce that relaxation, and then helping to really learn and build a trust and connection within themselves. So that's one of the things that you do. There's really mindful interactions, and then teaching them, of course, they're tuning into their own bodies, but they're also tuning to their babies, and babies communicate, and not necessarily with language like we do, but they can communicate things like visuals, images, colors, movement, right? There's things that they can communicate back with. And so, it can take a few sessions for that to happen, but really understanding and gaining insight and having mindful interaction with their bodies as well as what that does is it helps them to bond, it helps them to trust their body, understand what the experiences of themselves and baby. And then we have also sessions towards the end, the final weeks of pregnancy, that are all about separating and individuating. So you do those connection sessions, and the dads can be a part of that, as much a part of that too as well. And then it's all about that transition. That kind of transition can be hard. I kind of equate it to a similar feeling sometimes with grief or loss, with that separation of becoming empty, right? When there's that transition there, and they're leaving the house, they're leaving the nest. Well, it's different when they've been a part of your body for so long. And some people have a challenge with that, and the babies might have a challenge with that. They might be apprehensive or not sure what's going on the outside, and they want to come out for that. And so really teaching both the baby and the mother that have separate thoughts and body, and to teach them that it's right to soothe that, so that you can prevent a lot of complications that can happen, right? We're fighting those fears and anxieties on both levels. So both the mother and the fears and making them feel securely attached and bonded, and understanding that that's still going to be there, even though it's going to be different, together outside. And so teaching them that, life outside the womb for both of them is to just be a new chapter. It's not going to be a loss. It's not going to be scary. And so it's really an amazing technique for helping parents to feel a greater bond. Even when there's unplanned things that happen or come up, they can feel more secure. They can feel like they can be their own advocate as parents. They can advocate for themselves, baby. They can communicate. They are a team in the birth process. So really teaching them how to work together and how to communicate through that. Understanding their needs with great ease, and are born, like Barb said, they tend to be calmer. They tend to be more emotionally regulated, more secure. You're not going to have that really strong separation anxiety, for example. They're really bonded in their understanding and going through that process. They're going to be more curious, and again, feeling secure that they can go out and explore and you're going to be there when they do, and that it's okay and it's safe to do that. There's such a greater ease in that birthing process, higher self-esteem and confidence. But to me, the biggest thing really is that prevention of that trauma. To be able to do that is so amazing. Help the parents to release past fears and anxieties and traumas, but then to prevent it with this birth is really incredible. So to me, it's fantastic to think, okay, by doing this work, I'm helping people to be able to then maybe not have to come to some us when they're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, when they keep playing out all of these issues with insecure attachment and adjustment disorders and all of these anxieties and depression and all of these things, maybe there's less of that, right? To unravel when they get older, which is what I felt like I was doing for like 20 years. I was just, constantly like helping people unravel all the things that had happened to them all those decades ago. They were born. And so I have some really amazing statistics that I would like to share. And it is truly incredible. So specifically for prenatal bonding VA, I'm going to tell you about who it's for, and then I'm going to go through the statistics because I feel like they're linked together. So if somebody has a desire to have a really strong connection with their babies from an early age, that's a great reason to do this. If they have fears or worries regarding birth or parenting, again, like I mentioned earlier, things on or about birth itself. If they're stressed or otherwise feeling burdened in that pregnancy, perhaps they unplanned and they were uncertain, and they're trying to figure out the feelings and feel that connection there. If they've experienced postpartum issues such as depression in previous pregnancies or any other time, because people who've already had things like depression, anxiety, OCD, etc., have a much higher, and Barb said 20%, and I'm going to talk about that, but they'll have a much higher rate if they've already experienced that in their lives. They get pregnant as well. If they've experienced any traumatic previous birth or loss, if their baby in the past was born prematurely, so any previous pregnancies where they've had those losses or premature births, if their pregnancy was considered high risk or their baby's been diagnosed with some kind of disease, like I said, that's amazing to be able to strengthen the pregnancy and it back for miracles, like she mentioned, or if they've undergone fertility treatments or candidate for this as well, because it reduces fear and therefore pain in childbirth, because we have that fear, tension, pain syndrome. If we have fears and anxieties, then as we know as hypnotists and therapists, our brains are directing our bodies. It helps the mother to tune in, right? So she will know, have that more intuition of what's going on inside. And it results in a reduced need for interventions. So medical intervention, which gives a way higher probability of a natural birth. So for example, 12% C-section rate versus a third, which is a huge difference, right? So then basically what you're doing is you're eliminating all the things that aren't medical reasons to do that, right? A lot of times it is these things that are causing, so fear, tension, pain syndrome. The other acronym that matches that is failure to progress in pregnancy. And so it helps shut that down, right? It eliminates that because they are trusting in their bodies and they aren't interrupting their body's natural. Fewer premature births, like I was talking about, 1% versus the average of percent, and then reduced traumatic stress caused by birth for both the mother and child that I mentioned. So the postpartum depression rate really rare, 1 to 2%, 20, depending on what they're experiencing. And so that's what I wanted to share next, is I really wanted to share more of those stats that I looked up because it really is remarkable. Just knowing, because I think it's so important because we don't know those numbers in our country. And so I'm just going to quote the US. I hope others too. But think about this, like postpartum depression or mental health challenges, only about 50% are actually reported and diagnosed. So only half. And so if we're saying like 1 in, 7, let's say, or 1 in 5, depending on which studies you go to, so 15 to 20%, that's only the ones that are reported and that are diagnosed. So it really is probably double that, is what they're saying. And so, anywhere from that 15 to 20% means 600,000 women in the US are diagnosed with postpartum depression every year. So if only half are diagnosed, 1.2 million people. So that's a huge epidemic. And those numbers only account for live births. So that is not taking into account any losses at all whatsoever. That's only if that pregnancy goes where the baby survives and that. So if they miscarry or have stillbirth, that's another 900,000 women suffering from postpartum depression just annually in the US, right? And then we look at fathers. So we only talk about women, okay? So fathers, says half, 50% of men who have partners diagnosed with postpartum depression will go on to develop depression themselves. So if you add all of that up, that's a few million people a year who are dealing with it. And about 10% of new fathers experience symptoms of depression during the postpartum period just on their own, right? So that's huge. So again, 20% of women. So baby blues is not technically postpartum depression. So that's a whole nother category. So that's not full-blown diagnosable depression, but it's something that can set in within a few days after birth. And they're saying 50 to 75% of mothers are dealing with baby blues, but it doesn't last. It doesn't go into that. Now, I mentioned postpartum anxiety, OCD. So now 17% experience anxiety within the first 3 months after giving birth. OCD is lower, 3 to 5%, but my clients who've had OCD before, so if they had OCD before getting pregnant, it's up to 75% that are going to have postpartum OCD after the fact, and it lasts longer, at least 6 months. So I've worked with clients who, we're still dealing with that. So this isn't a short list. Postpartum panic disorder, 7%, about 10% for PTSD postpartum, but 30%, so about a third of mothers experience complications during pregnancy and delivery, meet partial criteria for PTSD. So if you think about that, that's actually 40% of women. If they've dealt with any kind of complications during childbirth or pregnancy, 40% of them are postpartum PTSD, at least partial criteria. So, and then postpartum psychosis, or 2 in every 1,000. But think about the fact that there's so many people who are dealing with this and with these types of techniques. What I love hearing, and I think you'll love this too. So the thing that's so beautiful is that breastfeeding women have a significantly lower risk of postpartum depression than women that aren't breastfeeding. And so the longer a mother breastfeeds, the lower her risk of postpartum depression. And so what's so incredible with prenatal bonding PA, besides all those other stats that I already gave you about less medical interventions, less postpartum challenges, less trauma for the baby as well as the mother, is that 98.5% of prenatal bonding PA participants were nursing immediately after birth, and 92% were still breastfeeding after 6 months, because we do assessment. So after the baby's born, we do a 1 month and a 6-month assessment as well. So we follow up and get these numbers versus 63% who were exclusively nursing after birth without prenatal bonding, and 25% after 6 months. in the general population. Now, the numbers are a little higher if they were doing some breastfeeding but not exclusive. But how incredible is that not only is it the effects during pregnancy of doing prenatal bonding, but also those effects keep going. And the babies are, again, more well adjusted. They have better emotional and nervous system regulation. They have better secure attachment, bonding with their parents. Highly intelligent, curious, like looking around, what's going on, and feeling like they can engage with the world. And Barb, I would love for you to share the story about the baby who wasn't anxiously, nervously to their parents. That story.
Which one are you?
You had said it was one of your clients, I think, that you worked with, and the little one was like exploring.
Oh, yes.
And the other ones were all scared. And
yeah, definitely. It was actually the person was a neuroscientist who was skeptical about the program and took the program. And with her child, they lived in a 3-floor house, and she never had baby gate.
Yeah.
That child go to the end of the stairs, get a feel for how low the step was, and knew this isn't a smart thing to do. She never had baby gate. So she called me about 7 months after the birth. She said, Barb, my baby's different. And I said, I know. And she said, well, I was just at a mom's group, and my child just wants to explore. And there was somebody playing a piano, and he wanted to go over to the piano, and he'd look back at me, and I said, it's okay. So he went up there, and he was ready to, thinking about trying to get up on the stool and so forth. And the other babies that were there were kind of clinging to their mother's skirts. Oh my gosh. Going on your own, these kids just go. They just go.
And they look back and they know you're there and they know it's okay.
Yep.
But they have that confidence and they have that secure attachment. Oh, it's okay. I can do this.
And to have a mother medical problem and a real medical, like tumors in her baby's heart, and to imagine on her own, I want to see that blood flow go through that heart. I'm imagining that blood flow, that heart. I'm going to do everything I can to bring this baby into the world and have her be healthy, even though these challenges. Now, how many pregnant women would have panicked when they heard information like that? She had a week to panic, and then she came back to bonding and said, okay, we're going to do this work. We're going to let that baby know no matter what we're facing, we're going to be there for them. And the medical community, with all the testing, all the blockages that were in that baby's heart, just like, and so at the birth, we had Children's Hospital, we had the NICU there. They didn't know if the baby would transition with the heart when the baby came on from air, and the blood flow goes into the baby's whole heart system. That's a transition that takes place at birth. They had no idea this child would make it. Baby came out with a scream. Mom's one wish was that the baby could at least be on her chest for seconds before they took the baby away. Baby was on her chest for 2 hours after the basic assessment. And Children's went home. The baby went to the NICU for 24 hours. Mommy managed to go up every 3 hours, breastfeed her. And when the 24 hours are up, she said, give me my baby back. And this little baby's 18 months old now. they have no concept of this baby is, and she's a spitfire. So here's another example of faith, hope, knowing the challenges there, and to be able to just send this love, unconditional love for these babies, which lowers stress and made all these things. I've had so many cases along the line that they never thought the baby would make it. And these babies that I still um, that- that- um, so it is the most rewarding work that I personally have ever done in my life. And I've been over. And this work is, I'm so passionate, and people feel that passion that they hear about this. And now we have Jody, who is, you can see her passion for this work, having to try to heal people. And now she has a process where she can prevent some of the family's traumas that she has helped heal. And she's so on board. It is just so exciting to be able to pass the torch to the younger generation and have those minds open up to the importance of the gestational period. It's a critical period that is completely ignored by the medical.
So this is definitely something that a lot of people have never thought, thought about connecting with their babies before they're born. They've done a little bit, talk, sing, and you play the music and do things like that, but this is on such a deeper level. And at least especially for stressor. It's just it's so special. And so I hope that you all will be able to take this information and and just know about it. Just basically spread awareness about it. That it exists. And of course, now back from Germany, so feel free to refer them. if they're in the greater Seattle area or North area. Barb is here too. And so, let us know if you do come across and you're interested in about any of these things, prenatal bonding, BA, or hypnotherapy. Have a trainer right here that you can talk to as well. And like I said, it is a process. I feel like it's so worth it. More about. So check out the books that she shared and about it. You can go to APA's website, Barb's website, and check that out. I'm going to have it online here in a minute. I really started yesterday. So yes, you can definitely contact us for more.
Right. And APA is Association AP Prenatal or Prenatal and Postpartum Psychology and Health. So there's 3 P's in it. And then AH.
Yeah, APPPAH.
Yep. And they have free lectures every Monday morning at 9 o'clock. You don't have to be a member of the organization. Go on the website birthpsychology.com, and there's a lecture there. Sometimes it's a doula, sometimes it's a psychologist, sometimes it's someone speaking on grief. They're all free lectures from 9 to 10. That's the usual time on Monday mornings. And you just go onto the website and sign up that you want to receive the notifications of those lectures, and just getting a newsletter from APA, because this work is going, I mean, we need to spread the word. It is difficult for so many people, and those of you that have read anything by Gabor Mate says a lot of professionals do not want to get into this concept because they haven't healed their own trauma.
Yeah.
And yet we need a birthing family to have this knowledge, and that will change society as a whole. Now, what we're doing is thousands of years in India, in China, in Japan, they had classes for pregnant women, and they would sing together to their babies, or they would chant together for their babies. They would welcome their babies before they were born. Very spiritual people. And it's been lost due to the industrialized. And now we're going, they had no research, not 1 ounce of research. They knew it. They sensed it, that babies are affected by being fed. The only thing that we brought from that was the baby's affected by what you eat. And
Yeah.
that's absolutely true.
Not
But
just in here, up here.
Not the
Yeah.
emotional need that baby to welcome. And 45% of our babies coming into the world are unplanned, and 20% of that, they're unwanted. And so only about half of it is actually well. So we wonder why we have mental problems. And this is not just us, this is all over the world. We wonder why we have mental this is so thick. And what are we doing, Joe? We're getting parents to go into alpha theta state.
Yes, we are. Yes, we
to
are.
be able to feel their bodies and express their emotions. So there's where hypnosis concepts come into all of this work. It's the feeling, it's the emotion, it's